welcome to this episode of Let's Talk Someone Six Sports. Today, my special guest is Ted Goldberg, and we'll be talking Sabres hockey. Um, how's your day going so far?
Not too bad. Thanks for asking. Got a nice little run in. Saw the Sabres are making taxi squad moves and not going to see Jacob Bryson, it looks like, tonight. So I don't know what the heck this team is thinking, but what's the worst that could happen? They lose again?
I hope they don't lose their 11th game in a row, though.
Yeah, that'd be something. That's quite a little skid they're on now. I don't know. It's been hard to watch. It's entertaining, but it's been tough to watch too at the same time.
Do you think Ralph Krueger will be fired before April, or will they wait until the end of the season?
I'm tempted to think they're going to wait until the end of the season because as terrible as this team has looked for the last 3 or 4 weeks, I feel like there have been so many moments where I say, okay, there's no way Ralph can survive this game. And then he just sticks it out. The Sabres lay another egg, and then he doesn't get fired. And he just keeps living. He's like Freddy Krueger. You just can't kill him. And Freddy Krueger, Ralph Krueger, I didn't even just realize that until now. I mean, those back-to-back shutouts against Philly, I really thought that would have done it. And then last night's absolute stinker against the Capitals, you think that would have done it as well. So you start to think that maybe the reason that Ralph is still around is not hockey related. Maybe it's financial related. Maybe they gave him maybe the Pagulas gave Ralph their word that he would get the full season regardless of how bad it went, because things have gotten so bad that this team is 16 points out of the playoff spot and we have so much season left. So they've been so bad that their point percentage is worse than the tank teams. There was so little talent on those teams before Sam Reinhart came aboard, before Jack Eichel came aboard. This is a much more talented team. They're playing worse hockey. If the head coach has been able to survive this far, unless the team loses 15 more games in a row, which very well could happen, I do think Ralph will survive at the very least into April.
How do you think Ralph Krueger is handling the coaching so far?
To be honest, I've disagreed with the way he uses certain players. For instance, he always preaches having offense and defense on a line together. And that's basically been his answer. Anytime last year we saw Jeff Skinner with Vlad Sobotka and Marcus Johansson, which is kind of weird because, you kind of want guys who drive play alongside Jeff Skinner, and Marcus Johansson and Vlad Sobotka are not those kind of players. And then this year we see Jeff Skinner, when he's not being healthy scratched, he's playing with Curtis Lazar. He's playing with Rasmus Asplund, who, sure, they're legit NHL fourth liners, but you'd think he'd be on a line with a little bit more speed, a little bit better passing, maybe. So that's just one instance of where I'm not sure I quite agree with Ralph on how he's using certain players. And then you see Rasmus Dahlin is a much less aggressive player now than he was 2 years ago with Phil Housley. So you've got to think that Ralph is sort of giving these guys principles to play with, that it's hampering their game. Rasmus Dahlin is less aggressive. Henry Jokiharju is making all sorts of weird mistakes that we didn't see him make a year ago or 2 years ago. And now Jacob Bryson is going to be resting. He's not going to be playing, but we're still going to see Brandon Davidson and Matt Irwin, guys who, I guess they're better. They're a better fit for Ralph Krueger's system. It's weird to me because Henry Jokiharju, he's not a perfect player by any means, but he provides so much more offensive upside than either of those guys. And, in order to win in this league, you got to score goals. And what's the biggest issue been with the Sabres this year? It's the score goals, Robby.
How do you think Dahlin and Cousins are developing in the coach's system.
Dahlin, I'm a little bit concerned because he's starting to make some of the same mistakes that he made as an 18-year-old rookie. Now, granted, I'm going to catch some flack for this, but people need to really lay off Dahlin because he's only 20 years old. I understand it's his third year in the league, and oh my God, he stinks because he's not Bobby Orr already. People need to calm down. First of all, we know that defensemen take longer to become good players. We know that. That's just kind of how it is. You take a defenseman first overall, they're not going to be a great defenseman in their first year. They're probably not going to be a great defenseman in their second year. It's going to take some time, especially with a guy like Dahlin, who I thought defensively was a little bit raw, especially because he's 18 years old. What concerns me, though, is some of the mistakes he's making. It's not that he's getting shoved out of the crease. It's not that he's too weak to stand up to NHL players. He's lifted some weights. He's put some muscle on his frame. He's grown a little bit. He's now about 6'2". I would still like to see him add muscle to his frame, but the issues he's making are brain farts. He sometimes will leave a guy wide open behind him for a tap in. And it seems like every other game, either him or Jokiharju was leaving a guy wide open on the crease for an easy goal. And those are mental mistakes. Those are things that theoretically, maybe should start to be ironed out a little bit by the time it's your third year in the league. He's played almost 200 NHL games. You'd think he'd start to stop. You'd think he would start to stop. I can talk, making those mistakes. Dylan Cousins, I'm a little bit more encouraged. Now, granted, it is only his first year after being drafted. He's had 5 points in 20 games, and I am a little concerned about his head injury. But physically, he looks like he's not scared to throw down with the big boys. And again, I'd like to see him add some muscle on his frame. But we've seen some playmaking. We've seen a little bit of finish. We've seen some nice passing. The skating is what has impressed me the most, and his physicality as well, because he's not the biggest player out there, but he's not afraid to throw his weight around.
No, refinery is the newer States, Dad.
If the Sabres get a new coach, who are they looking at?
Ooh, well, there are a few names. I know some of the more obvious names are Bruce Boudreau, he's been kind of chilling. He's been talking about potentially what it'd be like to watch the Sabres, maybe take them over. And, that's kind of an obvious choice because he's coached a few NHL teams before, and the Sabres have had a whole bunch of first-time coaches in a row. Maybe Gerald Gallant, Gallant, that's a name that I like a lot just because of the job he did in Vegas with a roster full of guys who had never played together, and he gets them to the Cup final. Granted, he seems to have this thing where he goes to a team, they start to play really well, and the second they slip, he gets fired. So maybe something weird's going on there. I don't know. But I like those two names. And then Nate Lehman is a name I've been hearing a little bit more, the head coach at Providence College. So yes, maybe the Sabres dip into the college game, maybe pluck the head coach from Providence. At the very least, if the Sabres hire Lehman, we won't be seeing Jacob Bryson on the taxi squad for very long because Bryson, of course, went to Providence, and Nate Lehman has sung his praises and said he's the best defenseman I coached in my decade or so at Providence. So Lehman's kind of an interesting name to keep an eye on, would be a little bit of an outside-the-box hire for this team. And considering they're coming off another outside-the-box hire in Ralph Kruger, what's the worst that could happen? He could lose more? I don't know. They're already losing now, Robby.
Do you think the Sabres will get off the losing streak?
Tonight or ever?
Like tonight or?
I think they will lose tonight. I'm going to say 4-2. Don't quote me on that, because if they win 6-0, you're going to laugh at me, and I'll deserve it. But eventually, I do have a hot take for you, Robby. I think the Sabres will win a game this year. Do you? That's the real question.
I mean, if they get their defense and their scoring without Jack Eichel or Dylan Cousins, I think they could win a few games.
Never a bad time to start.
Do you have any questions?
For you, yes, I do have one question for you, Robbie. At what point would you stop watching the Sabres? How many games does this team have to lose for you to throw in the towel and say, I'm done. I'm going to go watch Food Network or anything else?
Probably like, I mean, if they lose this one to New Jersey or like maybe like a few games down the road.
But you're still, as of now, you're still on board.
Yeah.
I respect that. Way to keep the faith.
Where can people find you at?
So I'm on Twitter at Ted Goldberg TV. So I'm on Twitter at Ted Goldberg TV. I'm not on TikTok because I'm old, and I'm not on Instagram because I am old. So hit me up on the Twitter, Ted Goldberg TV. If you agree with me, disagree with me, that's all good. Just don't be rude, please. Life's short. Be nice.
What what do you do for Spectrum News?
So I do a little bit of everything for Spectrum News. I go to Sabres practices when they're at home. I anchor sports sometimes. I do a lot of news stories, just kind of go out in the community and talk to people and take video of them. I shove my phone in their face. It's just a real good time. A little bit of everything. Some news stories, a little bit of sports stories, a little bit of sports anchoring. Pretty much anything. Pretty much anything they want me to do. I don't know. I do a whole bunch of stuff.
If you had a favorite Sabres player that you interviewed, who would it be?
Now, granted, I have only been in town for about 3-4 years, but Jason Pominville was always a fun interview. It was always a good time. The weird thing is, pretty much every Sabres player I've interviewed is like, you know, most of the best guys are still on the team. Like Kyle Oposo was always a great interview, but Evander Kane was always funny, and Robin Lehner was always a goofball. Like, for whatever reason, anytime I interviewed Evander Kane, Lehner was always in the background making goofy faces or saying weird things. Sometimes I'd have to like cut out the audio because he'd say something that wasn't very nice and couldn't air on television. But yeah, I'd say any of those guys are probably they were some of my favorite players to talk to.
Thank you for watching this episode of Let's Talk Someone Six Sports. Thank you to my special guest, Ted Goldberg, and go Buffalo.